Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. episode 19, The Only Light in the Darkness. This episode was pretty interesting because although the team, or at least part of the team, actually went up against a real supervillain in this episode, it was hardly a big focus of it. I mean, this guy didn't really do much killing or any sort of death and destruction in this episode. And he was an actually interesting villain, even though he wasn't the killing type. He had a very interesting power, too, which in the beginning of this episode he does use to stop a car and stop a human being, and he actually kills that guy. But this character had an interesting power where he would sort of absorb any sort of energy from anything. So it wasn't just electricity and things like that, although that was the main thing that they displayed was lights going off when he went down, and him attacking the one guy in the beginning of the episode. But the main focus of this episode, or at least that villain, was to actually show off a character who has been referenced quite a few times in some of the Marvel films before Coulson was killed off in the Avengers, and that is the cellist who Coulson actually ends up, or used to have a relationship with. And it was really interesting to see her character finally come to life in a sense. We always hear that she was a cellist and that she was really good. She would play in a theater and actually did great work and things like that and put on concerts. But we never get to see her. We learn her name in the beginning of this series. I believe it was within the first five or so episodes. We actually find out what her real name is. Other than that, she was just the cellist in the films. But it was interesting to see this character actually come to life, and it sucked that Coulson had to deal with protecting this character that he has such huge feelings for, but he can't let her know that he's alive because, as he put it, she's actually healing and moving on with her life after they spent so much time together and he was supposedly dead. So it was interesting that he couldn't actually tell her, and it would be nice to see that at some point in this series she is able to come back in and he's able to actually tell her things are fine and I can tell you I'm alive and we can actually be together. But in this episode, he had to deal with the struggle that she still thinks he's dead and he can't say anything otherwise because he knows that with the way things are, even before S.H.I.E.L.D. was destroyed, he couldn't do anything. And he certainly can't tell her now after S.H.I.E.L.D.'s been infiltrated by Hydra and everything's fallen to pieces. So it was an interesting episode where Coulson had to deal with his emotions and had to protect this woman that he loves. And it was good to see that where he couldn't actually interact with her and he had to make a really tough decision where he had to look at this woman that he had a huge amount of feelings for, but he couldn't do anything but help her in the background. He couldn't even be one of the people actually attacking this villain until the very last second. And of course, she couldn't see him when he was the one using the light, which actually makes sense because of the fact that he was shooting light from the gun, so it would be harder to see his face. So that does make sense. And when they kill the bad guy in the end, I assume he died because he did actually explode with force, and it actually knocked her down so hard that she wasn't even sure whether or not she actually saw Coulson. When he does get destroyed, he blows up. So she, of course, was knocked out, and she doesn't know if she really saw Coulson or not. But it was a good portion of the episode, and it was a really good short story. I feel like it didn't focus much on the villain, like I said. It actually focused a lot more on Coulson's relationship and also FitzSimmons and how Fitz feels towards Simmons and how he wants to actually tell her that he does actually like her and that he was jealous of the new guy Trip and how he and Simmons actually get along. So it was interesting to see that, and in the end, of course, he decides not to tell her, but it was a good little side story to this episode that they really told it as the main feature of this episode during the preview. But I'd say, if anything, the main point of this story was really Skye and Ward having to be in the same vicinity, and also some of the other little stuff that happens, especially the end of this episode with May and her mother. But I love the side story. It was really good. I enjoyed the villain for what he did. I think his powers were actually cool. I feel like they weren't completely explained because he had his powers and they already knew he could absorb energy and things like that, so that's why all the lights kept going off and he could absorb the life out of people. But he could also shoot what looked like dark beams, and I don't know if that's from his initial power or if that's his sort of upgraded power, but it was still pretty cool to look at, and it seemed like he almost controlled shadows, but I know he didn't. It just that's how they visualized it, so it looked that way. But he had a cool power, and he may or may not actually be dead because he was a showcase villain, and he had an important piece to play in Coulson's storyline, where he, of course, has to find some way to save the woman that he loves without actually interacting with her. So I'd love to see that character somehow come back even stronger than he was in this episode. And he is the reason we do get a little bit of information. One of the big things in this episode, and that is he got upgraded abilities from S.H.I.E.L.D. after he was locked up, which really caught me off guard. It doesn't surprise me that they would do just weird out of control stuff. Like they keep all of those weapons they say they slingshot off into space or into the sun, but him saying that he got powers from Shield really surprised me because I don't know what they thought they were going to be doing by helping this guy get more strength. I know they have all sorts of crazy technology. I mean, they brought a guy back to life, of course, but I don't know how they thought they were going to control this guy, or maybe they had a plan and they just didn't have the chance to enact the plan because Hydra started its plan up and they screwed everything over. So maybe that was their hope, was to give these people even more power and then mind control them and turn them into good guys. But he was still a bad guy. He just had more strength. So I'd love to see that storyline actually come into play with some of the other villains that did end up escaping, because there were a ton of people that got out of the fridge. So hopefully they actually make some of these characters showcase villains. Maybe in the next season. I doubt they'll do it this season because we only have 3 episodes left. But in the next season, because I'm almost 100% sure they aren't just going to resolve everything, they might have some of the other escapees become showcase villains throughout the second season, or at least for the beginning of it. And then who knows what'll be happening, if S.H.I.E.L.D's going to end up rebuilding itself by that time, or if they're going to do a time skip or anything, who knows. But maybe that's what they'll do with some of the other villains that escape. But for the first villain they showcased, he had a good purpose. At least he wasn't just the crazy villain who killed people, and he was actually a fairly subtle character who had one purpose, and that was really to stalk this one girl that he kind of fell for. So he had a good purpose, and he was a big component to Coulson and him having to relive some of his emotional feelings that he had to sort of put aside after he was murdered. But great side story, and hopefully, like I said, that character does actually come back, and we do get to see Coulson and him interact and sort of fight, one to do whatever he wants. I don't know what the villain actually wanted with the woman, if he was just gonna kidnap her and hold her hostage forever or something. But one guy trying to harm her, and then of course the other guy being Coulson, he wants to protect the woman he loves, and they have to come head to head, and eventually that leads to the woman finding out that Coulson is alive. But we'll have to wait until next season, or possibly season 3, to see if that sort of storyline eventually comes to light. But the main story of this, with Skye and Ward being in the bunker, was definitely a great storyline. And it had a lot of different moments where I was trying to figure out, how is she going to find out that Ward is working for Hydra? And the beginning of it was really good, where everyone has to get vetted in this machine that's like the ultimate lie detector. And Ward almost fails, and I love that scene where he almost does, but he eventually makes it. And I don't know what he stuck into his thumb, if it was some sort of nail or something, but he pulled that out. That was just a random gross scene to me, but it allowed him to actually pass the test. And then the team gets split up. Of course, Coulson still doesn't trust May, so she's left off of this mission. So it's Coulson, FitzSimmons, and then the new guy Trip, and they all go off, so everyone else is left at the bunker. The guy who leads the bunker, whose name I cannot remember at this point, but he's there the whole time, of course, because that's sort of his job. Skye, Ward, and May are there, and then we find out, I believe it was towards the middle of the episode, a little bit after, May is just not feeling the team deal anymore. Coulson doesn't trust her. She proved that she was vetted through the lie detector test. She proved that she had nothing else to hide, but he couldn't get past the fact that she lied to him in the first place, and that she knew something so huge, because he obviously had a huge problem throughout this entire series trying to figure out why things were so different with him and what happened. And when he finds out that the person he probably trusted more than anyone else on the team knew that the entire time, he's hurt by that and he just doesn't trust her. And I love the fact that she leaves in this episode towards the middle. I thought that was a great scene, but it was made even better towards the end of the episode where Coulson and his team, they finish the mission and he decides, I have to talk to May and I have to make things right and I have to let her know that I forgive her. And I thought that's really cool for him to have that resolution, but he won't be able to actually get to May and let her know that he does still care about her and that he actually wants things to be okay between them. So I actually enjoyed that. It made it even cooler that she had already left because his resolution won't come until the episode before the season finale or in the season finale. So I actually enjoyed that a little more, but it was really interesting to watch her take off, and then that left Skye, Ward, and the guy who led the bunker. And I knew that Ward was going to kill the guy. I was just waiting to see how he was going to do it and what scene it was going to take place in. But he takes that guy out once Skye gets the footage going, and I thought the simple way would have been the images come in and then the guy sees Ward on the television or on one of the monitors, and Ward has to take this guy out. But of course he kills him off anyway because he knows he has to do what he has to do. And eventually Skye finds out that Ward killed the guy, and I love that she put the coin back on top of the door. I thought that's really smart, and it's just her character because she is smart like that. And she played her role really well. She freaked out for a second, and then she composed herself. She went out to Ward, and she played the role like, hey, you freaked me out because you're being so honest and stuff. And then he, of course, has to lie and says, the team needs us so we can take the bus. And she had no choice because obviously this guy has all this training. There's nothing she can do against him. If she took off, he'd probably catch her. If she tried to fight, he would beat her, and there's just nothing else that she could do. So it was either go along with it as if she doesn't know anything, or get beaten up and captured and have no way to escape. So it'll be interesting to see what her plan is for next week's episode, or if she even has to really deal with her plan, because I know it's going to revolve around the team actually being swarmed on by the U.S. government. So that should be really interesting, especially since they're putting Maria Hill in this episode, which should lead to them is, of course, Nick Fury's going to be in the season finale. That was talked about, I believe, a week or two before Captain America actually came out. So he's going to be in the season finale for the season. And of course, the way to get to Nick Fury is through Maria Hill or through one of the, like, Captain America or something. But odds are they aren't just going to be like, hey, here's Captain America or Black Widow and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. But that would be amazing. But they're going to get to Nick Fury through Maria Hill. And May contacts her mother in the end of this episode, or she gets a ride from her mother. And so she's going to look for Maria Hill, but it was obvious in the preview that Coulson and his team are actually going to meet up with Hill when the bunker is getting stormed. So it should be interesting to see how things play out, and I'm really excited to see what happens between Ward and Skye and what the rest of the team finds out if they actually find this guy's body, which I'm sure they will because there are going to be a ton of people, and I'm sure there are security cameras all over the place in that bunker. So they'll probably find out that Ward is actually working for Hydra, and even if they don't, I'm sure somehow someone will find out at the end of the episode and it'll be a big reveal or whatever. But either way, even if it's in the middle of the episode or it is the end of the episode after next week is definitely going to be an insane one, because I do believe by that time the entire team is going to know Ward is actually a bad guy. But I'm really excited to see what happens. And like I said, we only have 3 more episodes, so next week, the week after, and then season finale with Nick Fury in there somewhere. But it should be a good couple of episodes, and I can't wait to see how they end this season, wrapping up to a shieldless, Marvel universe for season 2, and for, of course, the rest of the films. But comment below, let me know what you guys thought of this episode's favorite parts, least favorite parts, and definitely tell me, how do you guys think Skye is going to get away from Ward and his objective? Comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.